Senior fellow at Defense Priorities and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Lieutenant Colonel, always great to see you. I do want to talk about amassing of troops, but first, let's talk about these peace talks. What message is Putin sending by not showing up for these scheduled talks and then instead sending this lower level team?
You know, I find this really puzzling because Russia never offered to send Vladimir Putin to Istanbul. As a matter of fact, the idea was Russia's. It wasn't anyone else's. And they said, we will meet at the appropriate level in Istanbul on Thursday to discuss an end-of-war negotiations. That came in response to the demand by Zelensky and several European leaders of a 30-day ceasefire that had to be conditional or unconditionally accepted by Russia on this past Monday, which of course they wouldn't do. And then all of a sudden now then Zelensky tells everyone, well, I'll go to Istanbul, but only if Putin shows up. And then they say, well, he didn't show because he never offered to show. And the Russians have said, if you don't meet these conditions, then there's no point in even talking about a ceasefire because we'll simply keep fighting. That's what's really going on here. And this is, I'm just telling you, this is Zelensky's attempt to try and manipulate public opinion onto his side. But it doesn't matter what he thinks. It only matters what's real on the ground. And right now, the Russian side has the decisive advantage.
Yeah, you know, that makes a lot of sense, Lieutenant Colonel, you know, when you explain it that way. So let's add this other piece of it. What do you think it means that President Trump is now saying nothing will happen until he gets together with Putin?
Well, there may be some truth to that because historically and normally, when you get the heads of state together, that means that all of the lower level negotiators have gotten nearly everything or everything agreed upon. And then you bring the heads of state in to actually sign the agreement and put it into effect. But you don't have the heads of state come to do the negotiating. And right now, the Ukrainian side, with Zelensky still saying he wants security guarantees. He's still saying he wants the possibility of joining NATO. He doesn't want to give away his territory. It's miles apart from the Russian side. So there's no reason for the heads of state to get together right now. And I don't see any chance that's going to happen until the two sides get closer together, if ever.
Okay, so let's talk about this amassing of troops. These satellite images showing that Vladimir Putin is assembling Russian hardware, Russian troops, building bases as little as 35 miles from the border of Finland. Based on what we saw Putin do before launching his war on Ukraine, and I remember people thinking like, there's no way that he's amassing these troops and he's actually going to do anything. And then he did. Does NATO need to be responding to what is happening outside of Finland?
Well, like everything else, context really matters here. And in the massing of the troops in 2021, they were expressly related to the Ukraine side saying they were going to retake the occupied Crimea and Sevastopol by force if necessary. And Putin put the troops up built the troops up, say, yeah, you're not going to do that, et cetera. This particular time here, no one seems to remember that in the previous 4 or 5 months, you've had the Baltics, you've had Germany, you've had Poland saying they expect to go to war with Russia by 2030 or maybe 2027. And so they're building up their forces. They have an $800 billion rearm Europe plan. And so Russia is responding to that. And they're saying, okay, we're going to build up our defenses on our border, not to attack, but to defend. And so you can't view one without the other. So we can't pretend that none of our actions have any consequences, because that's frankly what led up to the 2022 war with our desire to push NATO up into Ukraine. So we have to be careful what we do, because sometimes whether we want it or not, there are consequences.
Absolutely. All right. So I'd like to zoom out a little bit. Something else President Trump has said, that the U.S. is getting very close to securing this nuclear deal with Iran. What do you think are the biggest sticking points? Do you think a deal actually gets done?
I really, really hope that it does. I think the biggest sticking point is that the demand on the U.S. side so far, what's been published, that the Iranians have no enrichment capacity at all, not even for nuclear power for their power plants, et cetera. The Iranian side has said we're not willing to do that, but they are willing to talk. So there is room for some kind of negotiated settlement. Maybe they'll get there, maybe they won't. I know. But if we also say that All of their long-range missiles also have to go away. I don't see any chance that's going to happen. So hopefully this will just continue on talking for a while, because if it ends up in a conflict or in a war, everybody's going to lose, and that includes us.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, after the